This parsha is a very Chassidish parsha. A lot of Chassidish nigunim that are based on the words in this parsha. And also in this parsha there is the posik kotointi v'kol hachasodim v'kol ha'emes of when the Alter Rebbe speaks about a lot. We'll try to touch on many of these things. The first thing I want to talk about is Yankov's preparation in meeting Esav. Rashi explains, of course based on the Psukim, that Yankov approached Esav with three things. Firstly, with prayer. He prayed to Hashem that he should save him. The second thing is that he prepared a great maton, a great gift for Esav, to try to appease him. And the third thing is that he actually prepared for warfare. If necessary, he is ready to fight him. So the point that I want to focus in on this combination, that on the one hand there is prayer, and the prayer is actually in addition to the fact that Hashem had promised him when he first left Eretz Knam, when he was first going to Choran, like Pashas Vayetze, that Hashem said to him, I will be with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will return you back to this land. So after that assurance, he still was praying. And then along with that, he was preparing all kinds of other methods of dealing with Esav. This helps us, this allows us to focus in on one aspect of Yiddishkeit, of Jewish life, that many people find it difficult to resolve. We are always told, and we know, that we have to trust Hashem. Hashem will help. Hashem will take care. And we go, and if we have any problems that Ayid has, the first thing he does, he says a kapitel Tilim. Whether it be, that's for Shalom, health problem, or it be a financial problem, or it be any kind of disturbance, the first thing is says a kapitel Tilim. Praise. And then does that mean that this is all, this is what you have to rely on? Because after all, we do believe that Hashem is the one who will help us. And without Hashem's help, we are lost completely. We're totally incapable. There's no way that a Yid would rely on anything but Hashem's help. Shloimeh HaMelech, David HaMelech rather, says in Tilim, you may be familiar with that posik, you may not. It's a posik in Tilim that says, Im Hashem lo yivne bayis, shov obnu bein of bay. If Hashem would not be building the house, so all the effort on the part of the builder is to naught. To naught means to no avail, to no value. It's never going to happen. David HaMelech in that capital was referring to the fact that his son Shlomo was going to build the Beis HaMikdash, and David HaMelech prayed for him that he should be successful in building this building. And he said, if Hashem will not be building it, then all the effort on the part of the builders is going to be to no avail, to no purpose. It's never going to happen. Even though, what does it take to build a building? If you have the bricks and you have the wood, you put one brick on top of the other and you build a building. And yet, David HaMelech says, that's not how it really happens. Hashem has to consent, Hashem has to agree that this building should be built, and Hashem gives the blessing that the building should be built successfully, and only then will the effort on the part of the builders be successful. In other words, we have this instruction, this teaching from the Torah, that we have to understand and we have to rely exclusively on Hashem. And yet, we have to do everything we can on our part to have it happen, to make it happen. And very often I have encountered people talking to me, how do you reconcile, how do you explain this? If Hashem is the one who is going to do it, why do I have to work? And if it's through my work, so where is Hashem coming? I'm doing it myself. Building a building, I'm putting one brick on top of the other and the building gets built. And if in fact thank you. If in fact much appreciated. If in fact Hashem is building it, what does Hashem need our building? Hashem can build a house. Like in the future, there is a Mikdash that we are waiting for is going to come down all finished, as it says in Medrash. So what does Hashem need us to do it? Why did Yankov need to send these gifts to Esau and prepare for war when he knows that Hashem is going to help him? The explanation to all of this, and indeed, as we actually spoke a little bit last week, the whole involvement of Yaakov with Lavan, and now in this week with Esau, was not just that Esau was angry at Yaakov and Yaakov had to deal with Esau. Yaakov, his thing is Yoshev Holim, he sits in yeshiva and learns. That was Yaakov. When Yaakov went out from the yeshiva to deal with Lavan and to deal with Esau, that is because that is Yaakov's job. That is his duty, to deal with Lavan and Esau. Why? Because ultimately it is Yaakov's responsibility, it is Yaakov's duty to transform, everybody knows transform, to change, and to bring Esau also to recognize God. Just like Avraham Avinu was sitting and he was teaching the Arabs, the Avdei Avodah Zarah, the idol worshippers, about Hashem. This is the duty of the Jewish people since Avraham, and ultimately all the way till our day, till the time that we'll complete the job and bring Mashiach. This is our job. And this is what this Pasha is expressing here. Yaakov has to deal with Esau, and is preparing to meet him with gifts and war and all that. And Yaakov says, he says to Hashem, that this whole thing that I'm involved with Esau is not for my own sake. It's not because I'm concerned for myself. But it is because I'm serving God, because I have to do this for you. And where does he make that statement? When he prays to Hashem. He says that this is all part of Avodas Hashem. To translate this to us and to translate this in our own lives in simple daily involvement, activity, and so to speak, on a lifelong purpose. Every day we begin with prayer. Every day starts with prayer. By you and people who are working, by business people, everybody starts with prayer. And then you go out and do your own thing. This starting the day with prayer is making a statement that if I'm going out later on into the world, I'm going to work, I'm going to business, whatever I do, I know that the reason there's going to be any kind of success is because that which I do fulfills Hashem's mission. And Hashem is with me to help me succeed in that mission. And this is the combination of prayer with work. The process, the job of transforming the world cannot be by a Yid sitting down and learning. He has to learn, but ultimately he has to go out and actually get involved and do and deal with the world itself. This is so true, and it is so deeply ingrained in the Jewish people, that the Gemara says that the reason that Yidden were sent out in Golus, and we are in Golus for 2,000 years, that's a lot of days. As a matter of fact, we were in Golus more than twice as long as we were in Israel. In our own land. And the Gemara says, what is the reason that Eden were set in Golus? It is in order to relate, to interact with the Goyim, interact with other nations, and to thereby and through that affect them. During the time of Shlomo HaMelech, this was the glorious period, the highest status, state that even word of Jewish history. So during the time of Shlomo HaMelech also had an effect on the whole world. But because that in Eretz Yisrael, by Yidden, the situation was so bright and so pure and so great, he did not have to go outside. He didn't have to go out of Eretz Yisrael to go and reach the Goyim. What happened was that they came to him. The Tanakh relates all kinds of stories where kings came to visit Shlomo HaMelech. And when they came to visit, they were so impressed with the teaching and the wisdom of Shlomo that they bestowed on him, they gave him all kinds of gifts. Which means that Shlomo HaMelech was mevarer. Mevarer means he elevated and purified the world without having to go out and go in and get involved in there. But this was a very short period in our history. Later on, Eden were not at that level to be able to affect the world without going out to it. And this is why we turned out to be in the Golus. But it still remains true that the reason we are in the Golus is because we have a job to do. It is not just, it happens that we are in Golus. The Golus is a very unnatural thing for Yidden. Everyone knows the word unnatural? Yes? Unnatural? Ni naturalne.
Opposite of natural.
We don't fit in the Golus. And we know this by personal experience. I once explained over here, but most of those who were present then are now out. So one of the great things that happened in our day as far as the Jewish people are concerned. I mean, in our day, in this past century, we've suffered. It was an extremely difficult century, perhaps the most difficult century in Jewish history. We had the communists on the one hand, we had the Nazis on the other hand. The whole world was aflame, and Jews had absolutely no recourse, no way to save themselves. And America was lost because it didn't have yeshivas. Judaism was kind of all but lost. In previous times, people began to think that the reason that Yidden continue to keep Torah mitzvahs was not because they can relate to it, because they understand it, because they appreciate it, but because they are used to it. It is part of their tradition. This is part of the way they live. For hundreds and thousands of years they lived this way, and they continue to live this way. And there isn't anything in the Jewish mind, heart, and soul that relates into Torah mitzvahs. So, unfortunately, this thing was disproved through a lot of tzoros. But put that aside, in actual fact, what happened in our days was that this was completely rejected. Because in every part of the world, whether it's in Russia, in America, Jewish people who have not been brought up with Yiddishkeit, who have not been raised from the cradle with Yiddishkeit, when they are exposed to it, when they are shown it, they immediately recognize it and say, okay, I can relate to it. This is really my thing. Which is of a tremendous power, and one of the purposes of the Golus is, in fact, to show that Yidden will not be lost even in the Golus. But Yankov Avinu, again, I'm coming back to our Parsha. Yankov Avinu returned back from Lavan, and now he met up with Esau. For those of you who learned today's Parsha, he already passed Esau, and he continued on, and he went to Sukkot, and then he went to Shechem. And there in the Parsha it says, Vayover Yankiv Sholem Ir Shechem, that Yankiv came whole, Sholem, whole, not damaged, without any damage, to the city of Shechem. And Rashi explains, what does it mean he came unscathed, undamaged to the city of Shechem? Rashi says, he was sholem begufa, he was whole in his body, because the Esau's malach had hurt him, had displaced his side, and now he was cured from that, and he gave Esau a big gift, which was worth a lot of money, and now he was replaced. Him was replenished. He didn't lose any of the money. And then the third thing is that he did not lose the Torah. Sholem b'Teirosei, which is an amazing thing. He came back, Sholem b'Teirosei, whole with his Torah. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned, I think last week, that one of the things that Yankee was afraid of, when he went to the house of Lavan, and he worked there for 20 years, and during these 20 years he did not have a chance to learn, and he was afraid that he's going to lose and forget the Torah. And he came back, Sholem b'Teirosei, whole with his Torah. Again, this also is something which is reflected in our Golus, in our time. That here we have Yidden who are lost to the extent where they know nothing about Yiddishkeit. Nothing. So you would think, like I mentioned before, how are they ever going to come to understand Torah? And the Pasuk says that not only are they going to understand the Torah, but they're going to understand Torah as if they never lost it. Sholem, complete, whole. They've come back and sit down to learn Torah from scratch, without any background, and they're going to come out whole, like as if they always learned. Why is that? Because in every Yid, as you've learned in Tanya, there is a neshama, and the neshama is a godly neshama that understands Torah naturally and inherently. And this is why a Yid can start learning Torah anytime, and he can replenish, he can fill, he can catch up. He can catch up that which he missed before. As we spoke about previously, I want to briefly re-emphasize that Torah learning, even though it appears that we have to learn without logic, with our mind, but in truth, Torah learning is something which relates to the neshama. The neshama of a Yid understands Torah. And this is why it is possible for a Yid to come from a completely different background and learn Torah and fill it up as if he never missed it. Another part in this parsha, where Yankov Avinu says in this prayer that you learned right in the beginning, in the prayer that Yankov Avinu says to Hashem, he says, "Kotointi mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes." This is actually one of the famous letters from the Alter Rebbe, which is printed in the Tanya, which begins with these words, Kotointi mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes. Kotointi means I'm humbled. I feel small because of all the kindness and all the truth that you have done with me. That's what the Pasuk says. This principle of Kotointi, there are several things which I want to speak about this. The first thing is, when a person, as one progresses, as one grows, from time to time, there is the Yetzer Hara is always playing on us. It never lets go. From time to time, the Yetzer Hara is liable to come and create a negative feeling in a person. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. What are you accomplishing? What have you accomplished? What have you done? And because that the accomplishment in learning Torah, like we spoke then, is not something that one can show externally and show, look, I have a diploma, I have covered this book, I've learned this, I learned that. It's more in the neshama. It's more in the development of the person, and it's more in the fact that the person grows up and recognizes that there is a real meaning to his life. And that's something that he can show externally. And for this, Yankee Avinu says, which means that a person, on those moments and from time to time, has to reflect to himself. Those difficulties and those problems, internal problems, that I had a year ago, what happened to them? Where did they disappear? Because that is the effect of Torah learning. The expression in the Pasuk is Mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes. Emes means truth. What does truth mean? How does truth come into this? If a person needs parnasa, he needs money to support his family, and then he gets a job, and the job pays him, and he is able to support his family. So now the problem is still there. He still needs to support his family, but now he has a solution. He has an answer to it. He's got a job, and he has to continue on to hold on to the job in order to support what he needs. That means that the problem has not been resolved in terms of, he doesn't have any problem anymore. He still has the problem, but he has a solution. Emes has a different quality. Emes means that the problem disappears. It completely dissipates. And very often, because the problem disappears, we don't even realize what we have accomplished. Because there is no problem. We don't see what we have. We don't see, so to speak, on an external basis. What did you do? But it happens somehow miraculously, magic. A person comes in yeshiva, and he has all kinds of internal struggles and concerns and disturbances and weaknesses and fears. What's going to be, and how's it going to work, and what am I going to do about that? What am I going to do about that? And then somehow he learns Torah, and somehow this Torah seeps into his mind and seeps into his heart, and he begins to see a different world. He begins to see a different truth, a different life. And all of a sudden, he has a strength to face his life. There's no problem. The problem dissipates. This is what Yankee was saying. When we accomplish things on our own, then the problem remains and we only have a solution. But when Hashem does it for us, when Hashem helps us, then it is emes. Emes means that the problem disappears. Das means emes. What happens as a result of Torah learning is emes. A person may go out and to study to become an engineer. He wants to be an engineer. The study of engineer does not change the person. It doesn't do anything for him as a human being. He is still the same person with the same concerns and the same fears, except he has now something to fall back on. He has something to protect him from the world. He has a trait, he has something with which he can protect himself. But his presence in the world, his life in the world, is still something which is a struggle. The world presents for him a whole challenge. There is Esav on the one hand, there is Lavan on the other hand, and he has to deal with all of them. And he simply kind of creates for himself a means of protection. When one comes, and when one learns Torah, when one gets Hashem, so to speak, inside himself, there, it's a completely different effect on the person. What happens as a result of learning Torah is that one understands and relates to life in the world. Like we just now said, Yaakov Avinu had to struggle with Lavan and Esau. But Yaakov understood why he struggled with Lavan and Esau. It wasn't something that came from nowhere. He knew what his job is, and he knew what he's accomplishing with it. The method with which a Yid, a Frum Yid, a Torah Yid, faces the world is that he knows what the world is about. He's not scared of it. Like I mentioned to you one time before, that what happens to a yeshiva bacher who learns in yeshiva all his life, and then he goes out and becomes a shliach, and now he has to be able to deal with balabatim, and to give a speech, and he has to be able to write, and he has to all kinds of different things. He responds to what he needs as he needs it. He doesn't have to. It's not a challenge. In 2 weeks he picks up this. In 2 weeks, our shluchim, we send shluchim all over South America. They never learned Spanish or Portuguese. They come there, and in a couple of months they're delivering public speeches. What are they, miracle makers? They're not miracles. And they're not the smartest and the most bright people. They're regular guys. Why is it? Because they are emes. Because they are for real. And whenever they need to learn, they can learn. They can pick up and do. They're not afraid of the world. Yankov was able to face up not only to Esau, but to Esau's malach. And this is what Yankov gave to every Yid. one time there was a person came to a journalist came to interview the Rebbe. This is going back many years, early years, like in the early 60s, 1960. In those years, 50 and the 50s, 60s. When the Rebbe was not known yet, it was something which people are first finding out. So this journalist came into the Rebbe. But before it was a woman, a lady. Before she came into the Rebbe, so she talked to the boys and the Bochim in 770. Bochim were very eager to talk to her about the Rebbe and all that. In those days, if a journalist came to the Rebbe, this was like a big thing because it wasn't known. And then she came into the Rebbe, and she wrote this up. She said, she asked the Rebbe, one of the questions she asked the Rebbe, she said that the Bochim, I met the Bochim in the yeshiva, and they seem to be naive. Seem to be naive. Naive.
Naive.
What?
Naive.
You know naive? You know what naive is? Naive means like a child who believes everything. Naive. And this is talking about grown-up men, 20, 21, 22, grown-up bochrim. They should know the world. They should know the world has good and bad. They think everything is good. They're going to go and they're going to do and they're going to take over the world. And they're naive. That's what she said. They seem to be naive. They believe in themselves more than it is justified. And the Rebbe answered her that what you see is not naivete. It's not naivete that you see. What you see in the Bochrim is that they don't have a split. You know what a split is? A split, break. A person has doubt. He thinks one way and then another way. When he is in yeshiva, he thinks one way. He goes in the street, he thinks another way. He sees two different worlds, and he's torn. And he has doubt about himself. He's not sure about himself. That's called a split. And the Rebbe said to her, what you are noticing is that you don't see a split in them. You see that they are whole. Why are they whole? Because the Torah that they learn is not a limited Torah, it's Hashem's Torah that takes up the whole world. And it explains, and it opens up by them their neshama, opens up their soul and their heart. It's not, but they don't have a split between the head and the heart. Everything comes together. They can put their head into it, and they can put their heart into it. They can sit and learn and be very deeply involved in trying to figure things out intellectually, and they can sing at the same time. It's not a contradiction. The whole person is there. And that's why there is no, that's why they seem naive. Someone once went into the Rebbe. This is really a marvelous incident. Some people went in to see the Rebbe one time. They were people, public people, officials, who were people of responsible positions. When they came out, so the Bochim, of course, spoke to them. What was your impression? What did you learn? What did you hear? So one of them said, it's amazing. The Rebbe is such an intelligent man. And he knows everything that's going on. But his faith in what faith is. He believes like a child. His faith is not compromised. You know what compromise means? Compromise means you make a deal. You say, a little bit I believe and a little bit I have to doubt. His faith is like that of a child. This is kotointi mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes. The emes that Hashem gives us. After we turn around and we learn in yeshiva for 6 months, for a year, we turn around and we say, yes, I learned so much Gemara, I learned so much Mishnah, so much, but what did I really learn? And I see, what I really learned is, I'm a different person. I see a different world. I'm not afraid of the world. I can go and face up to Esav, and I don't get scared of him. This is why I said that this is a Chassidish Seder. Because one of the inyonim of a Chassid is a Chassid is whole with his whole heart. A Chassid is not someone who does things externally, just with his hands or with his head. A Chassid is someone who lives in what he does. He lives with it. And as a result of that, the fact that he lives with it, it comes right inside him, and the Torah becomes part of him. Just like when a person eats a piece of bread. The Torah is called lechem. A person eats a piece of bread. It's not that he eats a piece of bread. The bread dissipates, separates, breaks up, and you can't tell the difference that separates between him and the bread. It becomes part of him. And that's how he lives. If the bread was to continue to be something separate, it wouldn't do anything for him.
Did you say what the Rabbi said? He said about the people came in and you said something to them? Or you said?
No, they didn't say what they. That's something else. I'm just repeating what they repeated, what their impression. They didn't say this was all political things. When the person eats and his belly is full, he feels, oh, he ate. But that full belly, this is not what's going to give him health. What's going to give him health is that little bit that breaks up, becomes part of him, part of his blood, which he doesn't feel. This goes right in, becomes part of his system. The same thing is in Torah. In Torah, you learn. You don't feel being filled up, your belly being filled. Why? Because it dissipates. It becomes part of your mind. When you study limudim chitzonim, it's called, worldly things, you accumulate a lot of knowledge, but it doesn't become part of you. It always remains something that you have. It doesn't make a different person. It doesn't change the person. It doesn't change the insight and the strength of the person. Rabbi Leactures is probably going to be a little bit late, and since it is also Yud Dalet Kislev, which is the day of the wedding of the Rebbe. So we'll spend a little more time together, perhaps talk about this, the wedding, what happened at the time, and in general, to understand the significance of it. If you want to have a moment's break, we could have a moment's break and then come back together, or else we can just continue. How would you like to do? Let's continue? Okay.
Excuse me for a moment.
You know that the Rebbe actually became a chosn to the Rebbetzin when they were still in Russia. You know that in 1927, that's in Tofresh Pei Zayin, this was the year that the previous Rebbe was imprisoned. And this was also the year that ultimately he was freed and he came out of Russia. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, was already a chosen then, was engaged already to the Rebbetzin. So when it came to, when the Russian government was forced to leave the Rebbe out, I can't even describe to you the danger that the Rebbe was in at the time. Every day. But there was an enormous amount of pressure from outside, from out of the country, from Europe, from America, for the Ruskies to let the Rebbe out. So the Rebbe they agreed to let the Rebbe out together with the members of his family and certain other people like the secretaries, certain very close people that the Rebbe needed for himself. So they wrote up the names of the people that are coming with the Rebbe. And one of the people was our Rebbe. So he wrote down his name. So they asked, who is this? So the Rebbe answered, this is a chosen. This is a chosen. So they said, a chosen? You don't have to take a chosen from Russia. You'll get another chosen over there. So the Rebbe answered, as a chosen, I'm not going to get over there. Such a chosen, I'm not going to get there. No replacement. The chasana, the Rebbe's chasana, the Rebbe and the Rebbe's chasana took place in Poland, in Warsaw. Even though the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe at the time, was not wealthy by any measure, but he still insisted he has to make a big wedding. And at this wedding, there were all the Rebbes. Before the war, Poland was very rich with big scholars and Rebbes and all that. And the Friedrich Rebbe sent out invitations to invite people to the wedding with his own handwriting. the invitations that we have, that we now use as standard invitations to the weddings, are actually the wording of the invitation that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote for the wedding, for the Rebbe's chasana. There was a man, Rabbi Aldhuis. He remained in Russia. He was ultimately killed by the Nazis. A very big chassid. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had asked him that he should be with the Rebbe the week before the chasana. And he stayed with the Rebbe the whole week. And he had a chance to observe how so to speak, the young chassid, the young chassan, conducts himself, how he does things, how he davens, how he learns. And he wrote a diary. He wrote down all the things, various things that he saw. Because the Rebbe, our Rebbe was always a very held back person. Nobody knew how great the Rebbe was. Until the Rebbe became a Rebbe, nobody knew that he was a great person. I mean, he knew there was a great, but not what he actually was. So he writes over there in his memoirs, in his Rishimas, he writes that he observed, he saw the Rebbe's davening, and he saw how the Rebbe was saying Kriya Shema Shal Hamita, with such tears and such crying and such depth, that he then, this Rabbi Althuis writes, he then understood that this was a blessing that the Rebbe is given to our Rebbe, that in fact he knew then that this is going to be the Rebbe. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't have sons. And nobody thinks who is going to be afterwards. But nevertheless, when he saw the Rebbe, the way the Rebbe worked, and the way the Rebbe conducted himself, he understood then that this is not a simple person. Even though the Rebbe did everything hidden and quiet, in a modest way, but it was obvious that this was not a simple person. At the wedding, the Frierdiker Rebbe was very, very elated, very happy. Like they didn't seem like that. The Frierdiker Rebbe, during the wedding, got up and he took a waiter's towel, you know what a waiter's towel is, threw it over his arm, like he was presenting himself as a waiter, and he took in his hand a bottle of mashke with cups. The Rebbe himself, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was going around to give l'chaim to the people who were sitting. Can you imagine what this looked like? And the Rebbe, who was sitting next to him, our Rebbe, you saw the Frierdiker Rebbe get up. So he also got up. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was going on and says, where are you going? You go back. And the Rebbe kind of, how can I go back? He didn't say, tefillah standing on. So the Rebbe himself, our Rebbe described it, says that the Friedrich Rebbe gave him such a look, you go and sit down. He knew he better sit down. The Rebbe himself, one time by Fabrengen, Yud Dalet Kislev, he said that this is the day that connected me with you, that connected him with the Chassidim. That was the reason that he became a Rebbe of the Chassidim, is because he became the son-in-law of the Friedrich Rebbe. During the time when the Friedrich Rebbe was in Poland, and the Rebbe was then himself was then in Berlin, in Germany, and afterwards in France, in Paris. He was a student in the university. And again, nobody knew who the Rebbe was. We thought, oh, he's a modern man, he's still a student in the university. But we found now correspondence between the Friedrich and the Rebbe where the Friedrich Rebbe is sending to him certain writings, certain chassidus, and he asked the Rebbe to look it over and make suggestions and to make suggestions to see whether this is whether this fit for publication and how it should be published. And then, when the Rebbe was in Sorbonne and in Berlin, the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe's mother, related a story that she was traveling with the Rebbe one time on the train in Russia. She was traveling, I believe she was going to see her husband, who was in Siberia at the time. I don't remember exactly the trip. I think that was the trip. She was there on the train with the Rebbe. And the train was full of hoodlums, criminals, gangsters. It was very dangerous. I mean, these guys can take a person and throw him off the train without batting an eyelash, without having to answer to anybody. And she was sitting there with him in the train, just making sure that nobody notices them and nobody pays attention to them, that so nobody would notice, would think of doing any harm. All of a sudden, the Rebbe, who was her son, gets up and takes off his jacket and starts putting on tefillah. Time to daven. Early in the morning, time to daven.
Our Rebbe?
Our Rebbe. And she writes that she was so scared she couldn't, but she wouldn't interfere with him. And the Rebbe, she never said, "What are you doing?" Even though, he was like a young man and she was his mother. But she writes that she was scared, terrible, because of these guys. You stand up right, and right there you're calling attention to yourself, and you're Yid, putting on tefillah. What can be worse than that? And the Rebbe gets up calmly, no rush, takes off his jacket, puts on the tefillin, and starts davening. The hoodlums saw it. And the Rebbetzin was sitting there and trembling. The hoodlums went, and they made a circle. Excuse me a second. You're leaving now? Oh, great. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Okay, great. Okay, bye. They made a circle around the bench where they were sitting. And they said, nobody go through the circle. Nobody come to disturb this person. They stood there like a wall, protecting the Rebbe against any intruders. This is right there. I don't know if even the Russians that we have here don't know the Russians of those years. They're animals. There was another incident that the Rebbe's wife, related that took place in France, because the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were in France during the German occupation. During the Nazi occupation, they were in France. So one time, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were in the street, walking, and the German soldiers were going through a march. You know how they marched, the Germans? In step, like Germans couldn't deviate an inch, it's perfect. And the Rebbetzin and the Rebbe were right there, right in the center between them. And again, the Rebbetzin was scared, and the Rebbe said, we are going straight. We're not going away. So you can imagine the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin walking, and the group of soldiers marching straight. They came towards them. They turned around and went around them. Can you imagine?
Who went around them? The army?
The army, the Nazi soldiers. They went around them.
Isn't that the time they were looking for Jews?
What? No, they were marching. Jews blocking the walk for the Nazi soldier. And they were walking around like this.
It's a miracle.
There is a story that happened in the time of the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe, like Yudas Kislev, now is coming up Yudas Kislev, when the Alter Rebbe was in prison, so he was in prison, and he was in prison around the area where the palace is in Petersburg, and he would be taken to interrogation from his prison cell to the court, which was in the palace. And the way to go from the prison cell to the court was through the courtyard, the yard of the palace. So one time he was taken through this courtyard, and in the yard as he was taken was a little Nikolai, who was then a little kid. He was playing. This Nikolai, those who know a little bit of Tsarist history, know that Nikolai was a especially vicious person. He was Mamash Rosh Merusha. vicious, very bad person. He's the one who would take Jewish children, send them away for 20 years in conscription. And in general, he was an extremely vicious person. And he was a little kid, and his viciousness was already known when he was a kid. He was a tough kid, a little kid. He was playing, he had a whip in his hand. You know what a whip is? Yeah? For a horse, yeah, a whip. It's a stick with a long leather strap, and you swing it, it makes a very strong noise, and when it hits you on the tip, it's very painful. It can kill a person. With this whip. And he was playing with this whip, scaring all the people, making noise, this little shakers. The Alter Rebbe was going through this courtyard, and this Nikolai saw the Alter Rebbe. A Jew? Oh, a Jid? That's a good chance. So he picks up the whip, ready to swing it on the Rebbe. The Rebbe noticed it, and the Rebbe gave him such a look that went right through him, to the point that this vicious kid got so scared, he started to cry. He started to cry and ran away to his mommy. And that's a Machzedek. The Alter Rebbe's grandson, who was Rebbe during the time of this Nikolai. When Nikolai became king, and Nikolai became king actually in time of the Mittel Rebbe, but main time was during this Machzedek. All the viciousness. Machzedek said that moment that the Alter Rebbe looked at him and gave him this sharp look. This weakened him. You know what weakened? It made him weaker. If not for that, we would not have been able to live through him. We wouldn't be able to take him. This actually weakened him so that it made it possible for us to survive. What? Yeah, it made it possible for us to survive him. All the things that Yidden did to stand up to the communists, like the Frierdiker Rebbe stood up to the communists. You know the story that the Rebbe said when he was imprisoned that he is not going to listen to them, he's going to discount them. And when our Rebbe stood over there, while the Nazi battalion was going by, everything, all of these things had an effect to somewhat weaken their power. So that made it possible for the world to survive these vicious people. Finally, in the beginning of the war, like in 1941, Tovshin Aleph, the previous Rebbe came to America in 1940. And the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin came to America a year later in 1941, which is a miracle in itself that they came from Europe, Europe was burning then. And they were able to, miraculously, it was like the last boat that was able to leave, come across the ocean. When later on, the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe's mother, who was in Russia at the time, the Rebbe's mother when the Rebbe's mother came out of Russia, this was already much later, 1948, she was in Paris. And the Rebbe came from America to greet her and to bring her across, bring her back to America. So there was a Yid, Rabbi Butman, that I knew, who lived in Paris at the time, and and the Rebbetzin, I believe the Rebbetzin stayed by him, or whatever. He hosted the Rebbe. He was in Paris at the time. So he said to me that one time they had a meeting. They had scheduled a meeting in his house. Many people were invited to this meeting, whatever the meeting was for. And the Rebbe was also invited. The Rebbe said he would come. And exactly the time I don't remember. Let's say they set the meeting for 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And they were sitting there. It was already very close to the time. And the Rebbe is not there yet. So he started thinking, since the Rebbe is in Paris, maybe the Rebbe doesn't know exactly where his house is. He was kind of scared. Maybe the Rebbe couldn't find his home. So he went outside to look for the Rebbe. He came outside, and he's walking, he sees from far the Rebbe is walking. The Rebbe is walking leisurely, not leisurely, slowly, calmly. So he comes up to him and he says, everybody is already waiting for you. So the Rebbe looks at the watch and he says, there's another 2 minutes. There's another 2 minutes. The Rebbe was always on time. Always. He came to davening, 10 o'clock, the Rebbe was there. 1:30, the Rebbe came out for bringing. If over the 50 years it happened that the Rebbe was late, occasionally a little bit, it was a very big concern. What happened? Because the Rebbe was always on time. I'm afraid I have to cut short. But the truth is that stories about the Rebbe now are printed all over it. You don't need. Sometimes you hear something that is not really, printed, but bichlal.
Can you get that journal the guy was writing about the Rebbe?
No, we have a couple of letters that he sent, but not the journal. He was never killed by the Nazis. I'll tell you another little episode that gives you an idea. Probably not written any place. The Friedrich Rebbe, I'll tell you a couple of little things. The Friedrich Rebbe was not well. Last year he was very, very weak. And he needed quiet. He needed quiet, peace. He needed rest. So one time, Simchas Torah, the Frierdiker Rebbe was one flight up instead of 70, and the shul was in the small Besmedrash upstairs. There was no downstairs Besmedrash. It was the upstairs. So he said the Rebbe needs quiet. So people quickly made hakofas, and they didn't make any noise, whatever. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, held the Sefer Torah in his hand, and he danced by himself a whole night. And he was, in the dance, he was saying, Shah. Shah means quiet. Shah. Shah. He danced, he was saying, Shah. Yeah. One time, the previous Rebbe was sitting at his desk. This was very later, in 1946, 47. He was sitting at his desk. And there was this lady who was taking care of the house. She went into his room, and she saw that the Rebbe was not himself. He was kind of looking someplace, and he wouldn't listen, he wouldn't hear anything that she says, and he was sitting there and moving his feet, and she got very scared. Very scared. So she immediately came out and just said, somebody come in and take a look. So they went, the Rebbe, unser Rebbe had just left, so they said to go home. So they went and they chased after the Rebbe. The Rebbe came back. The Rebbe came into the room, and he bent over to listen because the Rebbe was mumbling something. He was saying something. He bent over to listen. And what he heard was that the Rebbe was saying Oz Yoshir. What Oz Yoshir is? Oz Yoshir. Like the Eden said when they came across the Yam Suf, when they came across the sea. And he was moving his feet on the ground. And at that time, when this was happening, one of the echelons, one of the group of Eden that were crossing the border from Russia, they were at that time crossing. So the Rebbe was taking them across the border, actually. Making sure that they come across safely. All right. Be well. At Matzliach. Right. Sap in all the Torah you can, and you'll be good and healthy. What? Yes, 3 daughters.
Their husbands, they must have